Welcome to the Versa Business Tips Podcast. I'm your host, founder and CEO, Shaheen Mazloom. Versa Business Systems sponsors this podcast. We're here with a guest today from my home country, down in the UK. It's nighttime there. So, Mike, I appreciate you hopping on today and having a discussion about marketing, because at the end of the day, without marketing and sales, you don't got a business, right?
Absolutely not. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Shaheen. It's great to talk to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and what Napier does.
Absolutely. So I'm Mike. I run Napier. We're a business-to-business marketing agency. So we help businesses that have basically some sort of technology in their product go and sell to other businesses. It's as simple as that. So anything from generating content to getting that content in front of people through PR, account-based marketing, advertising, whatever.
Great. So, a big topic right now is content, right? There's people that are just, their whole business model is creating content and including a link so people can buy a pen or a t-shirt or whatever it may be. Content has evolved so much over the last few years. What would you say businesses are struggling with, or, what is their downfall when it comes to either creating content or, the type of content they're putting out there?
That is a great question. And the answer is businesses are just not honest with themselves. So people spend a lot of time generating content. I get it. It's hard. We spend a lot of time generating content.
Right.
But the truth is, it's not even an 80-20 rule. It's normally like a 95-5 rule on content. So 5% of your content produces almost all of your results. And what people get wrong is they imagine that everything is going to produce the same amount of results. It's not.
Right.
So find what works, double down on what works, take that, repurpose it into different channels, different formats, and really use that. So, treat your initial content generation as experiment and then really amplify the stuff that works.
Right. Now, obviously everything's about conversions, right? So one thing that I've had trouble with is, when it comes to content, posting reels and stuff like that, is tracking conversions, right? If somebody calls our main line or goes to our website, we've got a little bit of tracking, but what are some ways that people can track their content better to be able to figure out, well, where exactly did this come from? And how do we recreate this in a way that it's going to give us similar results? Because I'm like, when I look at some content, I'm like, well, how do I recreate that without saying the same thing or doing the same thing? Like, give us a little bit more on recreating the stuff that works.
Yeah. So, firstly, you're not always going to know what drove a sale. And actually, if you're really understanding what customers do, it's very rarely one thing. It's normally multiple things. They see multiple different bits of content. Which one was the most important? Which was the least? Nobody knows. It doesn't really matter. Right. If that content touches someone on the way to becoming a customer, that's a good thing. Yeah. So I think people need to, chill out a bit. The guys that are absolutely focused on conversion and just everything that gets measured is what they do, and things that can't get measured don't get done. Typically what you see is this big boost, so they might run Google Ads. Google Ads is easy to track.
Right.
And they'll get a big boost because they throw all their money into Google Ads. It's very trackable. And then the performance drops and drops and drops. And the reason is people are, initially are seeing Google Ads from a brand they know and they believe in. And eventually they've forgotten that brand. So it's somebody they don't care about. They don't know, your results can be bad. So you've got to mix like branding content along with conversion content. That's super, super important. And then in terms of repurposing, it really is about trying stuff. It's amazing. I talk to people, who are selling, technical products, industrial products. And, just recently I talked to someone, hey, we've just tried the radio. And because we sell to contractors who install electrical systems, it worked for us. We never thought it would, but, we tried this crazy idea. It absolutely worked. So, don't be hung up on, I've got to do this. I've got to, just post on Insta because that's what's going to make the difference. Right. It's not. Pick something that works for you as your main channel and then experiment on other things. That would be my advice.
Right. Now those businesses that are starting out or the businesses that just aren't really generating a lot of content, they're doing some posts here and there and advertising their products. but they're not consistent. They're not posting 3 to 5 times a day on every platform. Do you think it's better to just create content and post and just it doesn't really matter as long as you're getting something out there? Or do you think there needs to be more thought behind it in what you're posting? Does it look professional? Are you sounding good? Is your English perfect? Right. I feel like a lot of people get really hung up on, how good is it and reshooting 15 times until there's no pauses or stutters. What is your take on that? Because I've heard different people say different things, like it needs to be perfect because it's got to be professional. And then other people say, well, authenticity rules, we're all human.
So I think the honest answer is it depends on what you're selling.
Okay.
Firstly, people want to see other people. They want to buy from other people.
Right.
So, be yourself, be human. Don't worry too much about trying to be some, like a television personality that looks perfect, because that isn't going to happen. And if it does, you're going to waste too much time. Yeah. But also think about what you're selling, and it's going to be very different if you're trying to sell, I don't know, chocolate bars or, fun events versus if you're trying to sell, aeroplanes as Boeing. Boeing is not going to go out there and produce stuff that is very poor quality or produce things that are completely silly, because you don't want someone putting the wings on the aircraft you're going to fly on if you think they just spend all their time messing about and their quality's poor. So there are some industries, and airline is a great example, where you do have to be careful. But 99% of the time, what I find with business to business is businesses try to be too serious and too dull. And they don't recognize that actually, the people who are selling are not some amorphous business organization that's very professional. It's like, Jim, who's the sales guy, and he's mates with the customer, and he's talking to the customer and having a fun and laughing. You need to, get that similar sort of vibe coming through your marketing communications.
Right. So being genuine, being yourself, obviously there's always going to need to be some level of professionalism, but most of all, just, being respectful and not being too goofy, right? Like you're not spraying champagne all over the place and, being, acting like a child. Right. So that makes sense. So now beyond content, like what are some easy, I want to say easy ways, but what are some good ways to be able to, convert content into sales, right? Like when we're pushing out content, we're talking about our products, or we're talking about business tips, or we're chopping up a podcast and, just things that businesses want to see, business owners want to know. How does there need to be a call to action in most of your content for it to be, successful or effective? Or should you kind of mix it up like 25, 75? Like what is your take on having that call to action to be able to move forward into a lead form or an email or something like that?
Well, I think totally don't mix it up. I totally don't have 100% call to action. Mix it up. Right. If I'm seeing your content and all of it is, come and buy my stuff.
Buy my stuff. Yeah. I used to do that.
when you were at school and you were a little kid and you were playing some sport and you wanted to be picked for the team, you're like, pick me. And it's like, you're never going to get picked like that. Yeah. I wish I knew that when I was 6, but I've learned it now. So, absolutely, don't always think you need a call to action. You've got to think about this whole process. And, marketers, they'll get into it. They'll get geeky. They'll talk about a customer journey. And a customer will move from never having heard of you to being your greatest customer. And they'll go through loads and loads of steps. And I'll be honest, for 90% of the world, 99% of the world, it's not, hey, download my white paper and then buy from me. You've got to get to know the business. You've got to interact. You've got to engage. And so people, as I said earlier, it's really hard to track what drove a sale, because typically it's multiple things that you do in marketing that drive a sale. So absolutely, don't imagine it's all about conversion. Think about how you're going to get that person's interest, get them excited. So when they see that bit of content or that marketing piece that offers them the opportunity to go and convert, fill in a form for a white paper or, whatever you're offering, they're excited. They want to do it. That's what
Right.
marketing should do. It should change emotion. It shouldn't just get people to fill in forms.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's funny. I've been in business for a little over 7 years now, and I've started to notice more and more people that have been following me probably since day one are starting to do business with us. And, I mean, at least for the last year, I mean, I post 3 to 4 times a day on every platform. And so, even some of my friends, it's taken that long for them to turn into customers. It's funny. I was told by Grant Cardone's marketing director, Alan. Alan said, "Pretend like nobody sees it. Pretend like nobody sees it." And that's what I did. And I realized I started to post more and more and more and more. Like, you assume because you're posting it and people are following you that they're going to see it, but if you've got 5,000 followers, you'll notice you're going to be lucky if you get 20, 30 likes or 100, couple hundred views, right? Because nobody's sitting on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok all day long looking at everybody's stuff. So what is your take on recreating content, right? So not recreating, but reposting content that's done well, maybe 6 months ago or a year ago, or even a couple months ago. Is that an effective way to, to be able to reuse content that's worked before? Or do you think you should recreate it in a different, a different fashion, wearing a different shirt or a different background? What's your thoughts on that?
So that's a great question. I think one of the pieces of advice I got, which I always remember, particularly when it comes to social, is it's not that people don't care what you posted yesterday; they don't remember. They've got no idea.
Right.
So I think people get a little hung up over not reposting stuff. For sure, you can do it. It definitely works. The question is it still relevant?
Right.
And I
It
think
has to still be relevant. Right.
great content really fits into the time you post it. And if you're
Right.
posting stuff that is going to be relevant for the next 20 years, it's probably kind of boring. Make it relevant. And
Yeah.
so reposting the
Something that's
content,
trending, something that, if you're
yeah,
talking about the world market right now and how the stocks are crashing, or you're talking about how Snoop Dogg took the torch for the Olympics. Yeah, I've noticed that, trending, topics are really where it's at. And you can kind of, talk about those trending topics in a way that relates to anything. Right? You can get there eventually.
absolutely. I mean, I think at the moment there's an option, for example, for people to go on social and start saying, well, it's the end of AI. You look at the Nvidia stock price, it's crashed. AI is over. It's not going to happen. Not something I believe, but absolutely, I think if you were doing that, you could get some great engagement.
Oh, 100%.
So I think people have got to think about their content. They've got to make it relevant. They've got to make it timely. And if you're doing that, it then becomes more difficult to repost. If you've got something that you think you can repost, absolutely go for it. I think in America, you've got this situation where you've got a presidential candidate this time who's been a presidential candidate before. Talk about
Right.
him.
Yeah.
You could repurpose stuff from that, and that would be many years ago.
Right.
So I think people get too hung up on setting rules. It's like, I can never repost something, or I always have to do this. And it's like, no, do what works. I mean, that's got to be the biggest secret of marketing. I talked to somebody recently, one of my colleagues who runs a lead generation agency. And lead generation it's one of the toughest parts of marketing. Because
100%. Well, it's also one of the most important parts.
Yeah, one of the most important, but one of the hardest. And I just said to him, you're just so single-minded on the numbers. That's why you're good. And all he did was what worked. He didn't care whether it looked good, whether it felt like it was professional. He just tested it. What worked, he did. And he was still is incredibly successful.
Right.
And I think, a lot of people get hung up. And we work with businesses that want to be, big corporate, pretentious businesses that come out with content that often is, almost impossible to read because it's very pretentious, doesn't really get any emotion because it's all very factual. And you're just like,
very
no,
factual,
do what works.
very serious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. So, everybody says, post where your customers spend time, right? Now, in B2B, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, business owners are on everything, right? Like, I mean, if you're doing things right, a business owner should have a TikTok and should have a YouTube and should have a Facebook, and where shouldn't you be posting, right? Like, I've always wondered that. I'm like, well, yeah, post where your customers are, but I mean, I guarantee you, there's some business owners on everything, right? Like,
So you're absolutely right, and I think that there are two arguments to that. So one of them is go post where nobody's posting, because your audience will be there if you can somehow get to target them. You'll be the only person. There'll be no other noise, so you'll
right,
get attention. The other is, and what we find a lot is that a lot of business owners are in work mode on some platforms and in fun mode on others, and so you've got to be really careful about trying to post something too serious and too complex on a platform where somebody's just sitting back and relaxing. Trying to talk about a really complex engineering product on TikTok probably isn't the
right,
right thing to do. People want to
right.
scroll, they want fun. So either talk about something different, talk about it in a different style, or alternatively focus on the platform that your customers are going to be wanting to understand that deep technical detail, which for a lot of our customers is LinkedIn. So I
Yeah,
think it does come back to what I said before. I'm going to say this probably multiple times in the interview, but do what works in marketing. That really is the sensible thing to do. um,
yeah,
but decide a strategy before you do that. Don't just randomly go out on all the platforms and see which one works.
right.
Look at how you're going to entertain someone on TikTok versus how you're going to give somebody something that's going to help them do better in their job tomorrow, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Now, what's your take on posting a mix, right? So for the last probably a year, I'll post my personal, a day out with the family, going to a concert with the wife, and then the next video may be, about our business loans, and then the next one may be, fishing on my dock, or whatever. But mixing up the lifestyle, and so people can get to know me as well as the company, the products that we offer, the information we're trying to get out there. Do you think that's a good idea, or again, is it dependent on the product?
So that's a great question, Shaheen, because I think it depends on your business. So you're an inherent part of Versa. You're a key part of Versa. It's important that really people believe in you as much as believe in the company,
Right.
because you're such a strong leader there. Alternatively, we've got clients who are hundreds of thousands of people across the globe, and there actually it's much more corporate,
Right.
because it's not about buying from an individual. If you buy a product from them, you're probably talking to 20 people. They're all different. You don't want to hear their life stories. So do what makes sense based upon your business, not about your customers, not about what you like necessarily, but about your business. Big, large enterprises tend to have much less personal stuff published. It's not to say you shouldn't do it. I think if the great sales guys out there, they tend to publish a mix towards business, but certainly with some of their personal stuff. And personal stuff, by the way, on LinkedIn does phenomenally well if you get it right. It
Right.
does way better than the pure business stuff.
Right.
So just look at what you're trying to do and look at how customers see your business. Is it all about an individual? In which case, talk about yourself. Is it all about like the organization as a whole? In which case, don't make it too personal.
Right. Right. Now I get that. So for example, like for us, we're kind of in a transition. So we're going from mostly focused on small to medium sized businesses to now working with some of the largest companies in the country. So would you recommend that we dial the personal stuff back to come off as the more enterprise? Because nowadays with AI, you mentioned AI earlier. I mean, we can now focus on companies that have billions in revenue and hundreds of thousands of employees and be fine with a 15, 20 man team. Whereas years ago, you needed 100 employees to be able to even service, a deal of that size. So what's your take on that? I mean, should we start dialing that stuff back and start being on more of the professional wavelength, or it's worked, it's got us there, continue what we're doing?
Well, if it's getting you there, the first comment is that's probably working. So
Right.
probably changing what's working is a bad idea. I suspect when you go into a sales meeting
Well,
with a
it's
big
it's so my
enterprise,
thing
you're
is
different.
right. So my thing is it's working, but it's not working as well as we'd like it to, right? We always, and I think every business owner feels the same way. They're like, well, yeah, it's working, but I feel like we could get better results. So how do you differentiate like it's working versus I think we could do better? That's the
And
one thing I've
yeah,
always struggled with.
the only way you can do it is testing. At the end of the
Right.
day, I mean, I can give you a magic rule that says, well, actually, when you're talking to 50% small medium business and 50% enterprise, then you want a 20-80 split, and that's definitely the right. And it's complete rubbish. It's
Right.
fabrication.
Right.
It's what works is what you should be doing, and the only way you can know what works is to test it. So
Yep.
there's a lot of talk about testing in marketing. And I think it's one of those underrated things. It's really easy to do. Just stop posting personal stuff for a month and see what happens. If you get
Right.
20 big enterprise customers come in with leads, you probably have got a message there. Um,
Right.
you know,
Right.
if your small and medium business starts falling off and your larger companies don't change, probably not the thing to do.
Right. So okay, that's a good point. So I mean, look at the numbers, right? Like if you've changed your strategy and your numbers have gone up, stick with that, right? If you've changed your strategy and it's gone down, maybe you want to start going back to what you were doing before. Yeah, that makes total sense. Because I think we could do better. We're not doing bad, but you mentioned LinkedIn, and I've always had. I mean, me and LinkedIn have always had a love-hate relationship. Years ago, I loved LinkedIn. It worked great. I got some good sales out of it. When I worked for other companies, but since I started Versa, every time I talk to somebody on LinkedIn, they'll if they're willing to talk to me, it's so they can then try and sell me what they've got to sell. Everybody on LinkedIn is trying to sell what they have, and so my LinkedIn got hacked. I don't know, about 6 months ago, and I haven't been able to get it back still. And so I just never created another one because I had 200,000 plus connections. I'm like, I don't feel like starting from scratch. I never got a single deal off of LinkedIn anyway. But like, is there a secret to it? Like, should you be waiting for people to come to you? Because every time I've gone after somebody, if they're gonna talk to me, they just want to sell me something as well.
I mean, LinkedIn is a tricky social media platform.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the truth is, LinkedIn is one of those platforms where paid tends to work disproportionately well compared to organic. Um,
Paid.
yeah,
Okay.
so we see a lot of clients doing paid campaigns on LinkedIn. And if you're targeting a very specific group of people, you can generate very small, cost-effective LinkedIn campaigns, even though the cost per click is astronomical compared to other platforms. But you can
Even more so
target.
than Google?
Oh yeah, I mean the cost per click in
Really?
LinkedIn is way bigger than what you'd pay on Google.
Wow.
Well, depending on the search term. To
Right.
be fair, I mean
Right.
if you're selling Hawaiian holidays, then you're paying a lot.
Right.
But for our industrial customers, there's a reasonable amount of competition on Google. It's not that big,
Right.
but LinkedIn, you're paying multiple dollars per click. And typically, you're paying a very significant amount. Quite often 50, maybe $100 per lead, depending on who you're targeting. Um,
Okay.
and LinkedIn is smart because with paid, LinkedIn actually effectively charges different prices for different sorts of people. So if you're
Interesting.
targeting CEOs, you'll pay way more than if you're targeting, like our clients do, junior engineers.
Right.
Um, so, and part of that's competition, and part of that is basically status. So it's not cheap, but if you know exactly who you want to target, it can be really good. And we've found with clients that paid LinkedIn, generally speaking, tends to deliver results way, way quicker than anything they can do organically.
Interesting. And so LinkedIn even works for those enterprise levels. Say I'm going after UPS or Target or, Walmart or, any of the larger companies out there. all those guys are on LinkedIn, but I don't need to talk to the CEO. I need to talk to the head of payroll or the head of HR or what have you. LinkedIn is probably the way to go for that.
So LinkedIn is great because you can literally list those companies, list the roles you want, and target them directly. You're only paying to reach those people. And
Wow.
one of the like little dirty secrets of LinkedIn is that a lot of people want to target the C-suite, get these CEOs and people like
Yeah.
that. The truth is a lot of those guys are not actually on LinkedIn. And if they're
Right. They
posting,
have a
they've got an
profile.
agency.
Yeah, they've
Yeah,
got somebody posting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they've got someone doing that, someone managing that. So it's
Yeah.
not always great to target like the really senior people, particularly at large
Right.
enterprises.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So, there's just so many different platforms out there. So other than you've got YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, right? You've got your top 6 or whatever it is. Are there any new, I've heard about Threads recently. My photographer said he'd gotten a couple leads on Threads and, I should get on there. You know, are there any others that business, anybody doing business to business should be focused on right now, or is it best to just stick with the top 6? I know you said earlier if nobody else is in that area, there's no competition, but what's your take on that?
So, I mean, at the moment, there's no platform really coming in and challenging that. Threads is there. There's not a huge amount of activity, so you can stand out. There's not a huge number
Right,
of people. So you've got to have a big audience. For a lot of our clients, it's not great because the audience is
right.
so small and they want someone so specific. One of the interesting things, and this blows people's minds, is I don't know if you remember forums, like people
Yep.
posting questions.
Yeah. Yep.
Forums are still around and still big, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
one of the platforms that's
Reddit's great.
massively underrated is Reddit. Now
Yeah.
Reddit is hard because you've got to be super careful about how you approach marketing and selling on Reddit, because those guys, if they feel you're out just selling, they are brutal, and it's just going to
Yeah.
destroy your brand.
Wow.
But if you're out there trying to raise awareness, trying to help people,
Yeah.
just generally being positive, great platform. I mean, they also offer some advertising options as well. They're a little tricky to make work, particularly for our clients. But there's some paid where you can be much more promotional. But I
Okay.
think Reddit, as we see a number of like really deep techie specialist forums, but Reddit is underrated. As a place to go and just engage with customers and find out what customers are saying, and maybe contribute something to the discussion. Great place.
Awesome. Awesome. I never really thought about that. I mean, I've seen a lot of information that I'm looking for on Reddit, and I never actually thought about using that as a way to, to create awareness about, products, services, or company. Um, but that's great because that's the way we've always led with. We always lead with helping, right?
Mhm.
If we can help you in any way, shape, or form, we know we're going to turn you into a customer eventually. It may not be today, it may be a year from now, but eventually you'll be a customer, and it's done really well for us. Um, Man, I can't think of it. I've gotten so much information from you. The only other thing I would ask you is if you're not on LinkedIn or TikTok or say one of these platforms, do you have to build up a big following before you can start being successful on the paid side of things, or does it really not make a difference? Because I actually had somebody ask me that the other day, and I'm like, honestly, I'm not sure because I've always had a pretty decent following before I started doing any ads on any of these platforms. Can you just start up a new account and start posting ads and be fine, or do you not recommend that?
So I think the platforms are optimizing to be able to take as much money from as many people as possible. So they
Right.
they want to be friendly to people and you on the platform. And absolutely you can. You can create new accounts, new companies on LinkedIn, start advertising, and it's going to work. If you run the same ad to the same audience, it's basically going to do the same thing. You don't necessarily get preferential treatment because your organic LinkedIn is better. There is
Interesting.
one
Okay.
thing that's super important though. If you're really smart about what you're doing, you're going to run your various different posts on LinkedIn. So typically single image posts, very common ad format on LinkedIn. You're going to run them as organic posts, and you're going to pay for the ones that work the best to
Right.
run them as ads. So
Right.
having a decent organic LinkedIn lets you test things. And that means you're inherently running your best posts as your paid posts. So you're going to get better results that way if you've got a better following. And similar things on other platforms. And I know you can't necessarily directly take the same ad and the same post and rerun it in all platforms, or maybe you want to change the format, but you'll understand what the message is, what images work, things like that. So I think there's a real value in being active organically on these platforms, even if all your results pretty much come in through paid. The only thing I would say on LinkedIn is a really interesting thing here. Typically, you network with your friends on LinkedIn. So people quite often people network with people who are maybe in the same industry, doing the same thing, people they've worked with in the past, not necessarily your customers. So that's something you've got to be a little bit careful about, is your organic audience might not necessarily actually represent the customers. So do play around with that. But I really recommend, trying stuff out for free.
Yeah, that's a good point. You got to look at, just because something does well, is it doing well because all your friends like it, or are these potential customers that are liking it and commenting and things like that? Makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I know I've got one super viral video on Instagram. Had I think it still keeps. It's got 2 million likes or something, 50 million views. But it's not from my ideal customer. It's from kids and people that are looking for funny videos, and it's not it's not 40 million business owners around the world.
We have the same thing on our website. Actually, we just to demonstrate creating an online tool for a client, we create a tool that writes goals in smart format. It's supposed to write everything that's smart.
Right.
50% of our website traffic is basically students who've got told by their lecturer and their professor that their goal is not in smart format and they have to find a way to do it. And they've Googled smart goal generation and come to us. Maybe one or two of them might one day be customers, but they're not our target audience. So, I do think it's very easy to have things that look really successful that actually have zero impact on your business. So whether that's your video you mentioned or our tool or whatever, you've got to be careful. In marketing, we talk about vanity metrics, things like impressions and clicks. They actually don't really tell you anything about how things work and whether they're going to impact the business. So avoid those vanity metrics. Money is what people really, really, really should be looking at.
Yeah. You got to really figure out what it generated in revenue, how many customers did it bring, and it can be hard to figure that out. We figured out a way to do them with UTM sources inside of Go High Level, which is really, this whole UTM thing has blown my mind. How granular. I mean, we can test what platform it came from, what post it was, it's crazy. With the right CRM nowadays, you can really track things very, very easily and really see what's converting and what's not. So dude, Mike, I appreciate you hopping on with us today, man. So some of our guests will have some sort of a gift or consultation or book for our listeners and viewers. Do you have anything, or where can people reach out to you to get a consultation, to figure out how you guys can help them with their content creation and their marketing?
Absolutely. I mean, if people want to, reach out and find out more about me or about Napier, go to our website. It's napierb2b.com. That's NAPIER, B, the number 2, the letter B.com. And if people are, into marketing, into the B2B space, and I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast who are, we have a podcast that's dedicated to B2B marketing. So if you found this interesting, just look for marketing B2B technology, any podcast service, download it, subscribe to it, and hopefully it will have you have some more, useful information.
Yes, definitely. I'll make sure to put those links in the description so people can go to those. Dude, I would love to be on that podcast someday. Marketing has always been very fascinating to me. It's one of the most frustrating things out there, especially whether something works or it doesn't work, you're frustrated because you're like, why the hell did this work and this didn't? It's But you take the wins as they come, right? You can't complain too much.
Yeah, and it's really true. I mean, I can tell you, I've been doing B2B marketing for like 30 years. And
Wow.
believe me, there's things that we create that I am like, this is a surefire win. It's absolutely going to smash it.
Right.
And it just
And
falls
it
flat.
does nothing. Right.
And there's other things we try and we'll be like, well, we'll give it a go. It might work because of this and that, but
Right.
we're not
Then
really
it
sure. And
crushes
it
it.
just flies.
Yeah.
So it goes back. I mean, if I was to say one thing, just do what works in marketing. Don't be afraid to try stuff, and don't be afraid to go, got no idea why this works. I don't really like it, but clearly my audience loves it, so I'm going to focus on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, Mike. I appreciate you hopping on with us today. I know it's getting late over there, so we'll let you get back to it. Dude, can't wait to have you on again in the future, and I hope I can hop on yours to provide some value to your listeners.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shaheen. That'd be
Thanks,
great.
Mike. Have a good night.